I remember the exact moment Dr. Patterson delivered the news that would shatter what little hope I had left clinging to. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, and the autumn light filtered through the large windows of Maple Grove Nursing Home's family conference room, casting long shadows across the polished oak table where I sat with trembling hands. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Patterson began, his voice carrying that practiced tone of gentle finality that medical professionals perfect over years of delivering difficult news. "I've reviewed your case extensively with the care team, and I need to be honest with you about your prognosis." I was 78 years old, and my body had been failing me systematically over the past 2 years. First, it was the stroke that left my left side weak and my speech slurred. Then came the diagnosis of early-stage dementia, though I fought that label with every fiber of my being. The final blow was the fall that shattered my hip and landed me in this sterile, well-meaning prison where the smell of disinfectant couldn't quite mask the underlying odor of defeat. "Your mobility issues, combined with the cognitive decline and your recent cardiac episode, make it unlikely that you'll be able to return to independent living," Dr. Patterson continued, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he spoke. "We've contacted your daughter Lily multiple times, but—" He paused, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to say. "She hasn't responded to any of our calls or letters. The social worker, Miss Miss Johnson has tried reaching her at every number we have on file. I'm afraid we have to plan for your long-term care here at Maple Grove with the understanding that family support may not be forthcoming." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lily, my beautiful, stubborn, brilliant daughter who hadn't spoken to me in 3 years. The last conversation we'd had was burned into my memory like a brand, her voice sharp with pain and anger, mine defensive and proud. We'd both said things that couldn't be taken back, words that had carved a chasm between us that seemed impossible to bridge. "She's not coming," I whispered, more to myself than to the doctor. "She's really not coming." Dr. Patterson's expression softened. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear, but I want you to know that doesn't mean you're alone. We have excellent social programs here, and the staff—" "No," I interrupted, my voice stronger than it had been in months. "You don't understand. She will come. She needs time. Lily always needed time to process things, even as a little girl. When she was 7 and her father died, she didn't cry for weeks. Everyone thought she didn't understand, but she was just working through it in her own way." Dr. Patterson exchanged a glance with the social worker, and I could see the pity in their eyes. They thought I was delusional, clinging to false hope. Maybe I was, but it was all I had left. After they left, I wheeled myself back to my room, a small space I shared with Mrs. Fletcher, an 85-year-old woman who spent most of her days staring out the window, waiting for visits that never came. The irony wasn't lost on me. I positioned my wheelchair by the window that faced the front entrance of Maple Grove. From this vantage point, I could see everyone who came and went. Delivery trucks bringing supplies, family members arriving for visits with other residents, staff members heading home after their shifts. I began to memorize the rhythm of the place, the patterns of daily life that had become my entire world. The nursing home itself was actually quite nice, as these places went. Built in the 1990s with the intention of creating a more home-like atmosphere, it featured warm wood paneling, comfortable sitting areas, and gardens that the more mobile residents could enjoy. The staff was genuinely caring. I could see it in the way they interacted with residents who had no family, how they remembered little details about people's preferences and fears. But all the comfortable furniture and kind nurses in the world couldn't fill the hollow ache in my chest when I thought about Lily, my daughter, who had inherited my stubbornness along with my green eyes and my tendency to push people away when I needed them most. The fight that had separated us played in my mind like a broken record. It had started over something so trivial, my refusal to move to assisted living when the doctor first suggested it. Lily had driven all the way from Portland to Spokane to help me look at facilities, taking time off from her job as a graphic designer, leaving her own life on hold for me. "Mom, you can't keep living alone in that house," she'd said, standing in my kitchen with brochures spread across the table. "You fell last month and lay on the floor for 6 hours. What if something worse happens?" "I'm fine," I'd insisted, my pride flaring like a match struck in the dark. I've been taking care of myself for longer than you've been alive, Lily. I don't need you or anyone else making my decisions for me. This isn't about what you want, Mom. This is about what's safe. What's realistic. And that's when I'd said it, the words that had been festering in my heart since her father died 23 years ago. Words born from my own fear and pain. If you cared half as much about visiting me when you weren't trying to ship me off somewhere, maybe I'd be more inclined to listen to your advice. Her face had gone white. That's not fair, Mom. You know I've been trying to. Trying to what? Trying to ease your conscience by dumping me somewhere so you don't have to worry about me anymore? You're impossible, she'd whispered, and I could see tears forming in her eyes. I'm trying to help you and you're acting like I'm the enemy. Just like you did when Dad died. Just like you always do when someone tries to get close. Maybe if people didn't keep trying to control my life. I'm done, Lily had said, gathering up the brochures with shaking hands. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep beating my head against the wall trying to get through to you. Call me when you're ready to have an adult conversation about your future. She'd walked out, and I'd been too proud to call her back. Too proud to apologize. Too proud to admit that she was right about the assisted living, right about my safety, right about everything except one crucial thing. I wasn't pushing her away because I didn't care. I was pushing her away because I cared too much, and I was terrified of being a burden to the one person in the world who mattered most to me. Now, sitting in this nursing home room, I understood that my pride had cost me the most precious thing in my life. The irony was bitter. I'd fought against losing my independence so fiercely that I'd ended up losing my daughter instead. As the days passed in Maple Grove, I developed a routine. Physical therapy in the morning, though my progress was minimal. Meals in the communal dining room, where I sat mostly in silence while other residents chatted about their grandchildren's accomplishments and their own children's weekly visits. Afternoons by the window, watching the entrance. Hope and heartbreak warring in my chest every time a car pulled up. The staff began to notice my vigil. Nancy, one of the younger nurses, would stop by during her rounds. Still watching for someone special? She'd ask gently. My daughter. I'd always reply. She's coming. She just needs time. Nancy never contradicted me, but I could see the concern in her eyes. After 2 weeks of this routine, she sat down in the chair next to my wheelchair. Mrs. Thompson, can I ask you something? I nodded, not taking my eyes off the entrance. Have you tried reaching out to her? Maybe she's waiting for you to make the first move. The suggestion hit me like a revelation. In all my stubborn pride, I'd been waiting for Lily to come to me, to be the one to bridge the gap we'd created. But what if she was doing the same thing? What if she was sitting in her apartment in Portland, wondering if I'd ever forgive her for what she saw as abandoning me? I don't even know if she'd take my call, I admitted. You won't know until you try, Nancy said softly. And if I may say so, the worst that could happen is she says no. But if she says yes. That afternoon, I asked to use the phone at the nurse's station. My hands shook as I dialed Lily's number, the same number I'd memorized but been too proud to use for 3 years. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, warm and slightly husky, like mine had been at her age. Lily, I whispered, suddenly unable to find the words I'd been rehearsing. There was a long pause. Mom. Yes, sweetheart. It's me. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her struggling with the same mixture of hurt and love that was tearing me apart. Are you okay? She asked finally, and I could hear the careful control in her voice. No, honey. I'm not okay. I'm in a nursing home in Spokane and I'm not okay at all. But that's not why I'm calling. Mom. Please let me say this. I need to say this. I took a shaky breath. I was wrong. About everything. You were trying to help me, and I was too proud and too scared to see it. I said terrible things to you, and I've regretted every word for 3 years. I could hear her crying now, soft sobs that broke my heart. I'm sorry too, Mom. I should have tried harder to reach you. I should have. No, sweetheart. This is on me. I pushed you away because I was terrified of being a burden, but all I did was burden us both with this awful silence. What nursing home? She asked suddenly. What happened? Are you hurt? Maple Grove here in Spokane. I had a stroke and then a fall, and well, it doesn't matter now. What matters is that I called because I love you and I miss you. And if you never want to see me again, I understand. But I needed you to know that losing you has been the hardest thing I've ever endured, and if there's any way we could. I'm coming, she said, cutting off my rambling apology. I'm getting in my car right now. It's about 5 hours to Spokane, so I'll be there tonight. Lily, you don't have to. Yes, I do. I should have been there already. I've been wanting to call you every day for 3 years, Mom. Every single day. After we hung up, I sat by that window with a different kind of anticipation. This wasn't the desperate hope of the past 2 weeks. This was the sure knowledge that my daughter was coming home to me. The staff noticed the change immediately. Nancy found me by the window around dinner time. Good news? She asked, seeing my face. She's coming, I said. And for the first time in months, I was smiling. Tonight. My daughter is coming tonight. As the evening wore on, I watched every car that turned into the parking lot. Around 9 o'clock, I saw a silver Honda Civic with Oregon plates pull up to the main entrance. My heart stopped as I watched a woman get out, tall and slender, with shoulder-length brown hair that caught the light from the entrance lamps. Lily. She looked older than I remembered, more mature, but she still moved with that same purposeful stride that had characterized her even as a child. She was carrying what looked like a small overnight bag. And was that flowers? I wheeled myself as fast as I could to the elevator, my heart pounding with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. By the time I reached the main lobby, she was already at the front desk, talking to the night receptionist. I'm looking for Elizabeth Thompson, she was saying. I'm her daughter. That's when she turned and saw me. We looked at each other across the lobby for what felt like an eternity. She was beautiful, more beautiful than I'd remembered. The years had added fine lines around her green eyes, my eyes, and there was a maturity in her face that spoke of challenges faced and overcome. But she was still my little girl, the child who used to curl up in my lap and make me read the same story 5 times in a row. Hi, Mom, she said softly. Hi, sweetheart. She crossed the lobby in quick strides and knelt down beside my wheelchair, wrapping her arms around me in a hug that felt like coming home. I could smell her shampoo, something floral and clean, and feel her tears on my cheek. I'm so sorry, she whispered into my ear. I'm so sorry. We both are, I whispered back. But you're here now. That's all that matters. When we finally pulled apart, she held up the flowers, a beautiful bouquet of yellow roses and white lilies. I remembered that yellow roses were your favorite, she said. And lilies, well, I thought it was appropriate. They're perfect, I said, taking them with trembling hands. Everything is perfect now. The next morning brought a new kind of nervousness. The euphoria of our reunion had carried us through the evening. We'd talked until nearly midnight in the small family lounge, carefully navigating around the edges of our hurt, while trying to find our way back to each other. But now, in the harsh light of a new day, we had to figure out what came next. Lily had taken a room at a nearby Holiday Inn, but she was back at Maple Grove by 7 in the morning, carrying coffee and what looked like a stack of papers. I've been doing some research, she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. Mrs. Fletcher had been moved to the activities room for the morning, giving us privacy to talk. Research about what? About your options. About us. She took a sip of her coffee and pulled out what I could see were printouts from various websites. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Do you want to stay here permanently, or would you consider other alternatives? The question hit me harder than I'd expected. Over the past few weeks, I'd begun to accept that Maple Grove would be my final home. The staff was kind, the facility was comfortable, and I'd even started to make tentative friendships with a few other residents. But if I was being honest, I don't want to be a burden, I said carefully. That's not what I asked. Lily's voice was gentle but firm. I asked what you wanted. I looked at her, really looked at her. There was something different about my daughter, a confidence and self-assurance that hadn't been there 3 years ago. She'd grown into herself in ways I'd missed during our separation. I want to go home, I admitted. I want to be in my own space with my own things. But sweetheart, I can't manage on my own anymore. The doctors were clear about that. What if you weren't on your own? I won't have you sacrifice your life to take care of me, Mom. She held up a hand to stop me. Will you please let me finish a thought? I nodded, chastened. Over the past 3 years, a lot has changed in my life. I started my own graphic design business, so I can work from anywhere with an internet connection. I ended a relationship that wasn't working partly because I realized I was trying to fill a hole that was shaped like my family. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what really matters. She pulled out one of the papers. It looked like a real estate listing. This is a house for sale about 2 miles from your old place. It's a ranch-style home, completely accessible, with a mother-in-law suite that could be perfect for you. It has a garden, a view of the mountains, and it's close to the hospital and your doctors. I stared at the listing, hardly daring to hope. Lily, you can't uproot your entire life. I'm not uprooting it. I'm replanting it where it should have been growing all along. She reached over and took my hand. I've been running away from home for years, Mom. First to college, then to Portland, always telling myself I needed distance to be my own person. But the truth is, I've been homesick every single day since Dad died. The mention of her father made my chest tight. We'd never really talked about how his death had affected our relationship, how it had made us both retreat into our own grief instead of helping each other through it. When your father died, I said slowly, I was so lost. I thought I had to be strong for you, had to hold everything together, but I just ended up holding you at arm's length instead. And I let you, Lily said. I was scared too. Scared that if I let myself depend on you too much, I'd lose you too. So I kept running, kept proving I could make it on my own. But making it on my own isn't the same as being happy. She showed me more papers, information about home healthcare services, physical therapy programs, and support groups for families dealing with aging and health challenges. I've thought this through, Mom. Really thought it through. I want to come home. I want to take care of you. But more than that, I want us to take care of each other. I want to be your daughter again, not just someone who calls on holidays. The hope that bloomed in my chest was almost painful. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once you commit to this, there's no easy way back. My condition isn't going to get better, Lily. I'm only going to need more help as time goes on. I know, she said simply. And I'm not going into this with any illusions. It's going to be hard. There are going to be days when we drive each other crazy, days when I feel overwhelmed, days when you feel like a burden. But we'll figure it out together. What about your life? Dating, marriage, maybe grandchildren someday? Lily smiled. Mom, I'm 35 years old. If those things are going to happen, they'll happen regardless of where I live. And honestly, any man worth marrying would understand that family comes first. Over the next 3 days, Lily transformed from my visitor into my advocate. She met with Dr. Patterson and the entire care team, asking detailed questions about my medications, my therapy needs, and my prognosis. She contacted home healthcare agencies and interviewed potential caregivers. She spoke with contractors about making modifications to the house she'd found. I watched her work with a mixture of pride and amazement. When had my little girl become this competent, determined woman? She approached every challenge with a methodical efficiency that reminded me of her father, but with a warmth and humor that was entirely her own. You know, I said to her on Thursday afternoon as she sat beside my bed with her laptop, coordinating what felt like a dozen different moving parts. You're going to make a wonderful mother someday. She looked up from her screen, and I saw something flicker across her face, surprise, maybe, or recognition. Thanks, Mom. That means a lot, coming from you. I should have said it years ago. I should have said a lot of things years ago. She saved her work and closed the laptop. Mom, can I tell you something? Of course. Part of the reason I never got married, never had kids, I was scared I'd mess it up the way I felt like I messed up with you. Oh, sweetheart. My heart broke a little. You didn't mess up anything. We both made mistakes, but that's what people do. That's what families do. I kept thinking about that fight we had, about the things I said. I told you that you pushed people away when they tried to get close, but I was doing the exact same thing. I was so angry at you for not accepting help, but I never asked if you needed a different kind of help than what I was offering. What do you mean? I mean, I waltzed into your house with brochures and ultimatums, trying to solve your problems my way. I never asked what would make you feel safe and cared for. I never asked what you were afraid of or what you needed from me. She was right, and the realization was both painful and liberating. We're both fixers, I said. Your father used to say that about us. We see a problem, and we immediately start trying to solve it, usually without asking the other person what kind of solution they actually want. Well, I'm asking now, Lily said. What do you need from me, Mom? Not what I think you need, not what the doctors think you need. What do you need? The question was harder to answer than I'd expected. For so long, my needs had been filtered through medical assessments and insurance requirements and social workers' evaluations. When was the last time someone had asked me what I actually wanted? I need to feel useful, I said finally. I need to feel like I'm still contributing something, still have something to offer. And I need to not feel like I'm disappearing. Like the person I was before all this happened doesn't matter anymore. Lily nodded thoughtfully. Okay, what else? I need to feel safe. Not just physically safe, but emotionally safe. I need to know that if I'm having a bad day, if I'm scared or confused or angry, you won't take it personally or think I'm giving up. What else? I need you to have your own life. I know that sounds contradictory to everything else I'm saying, but I need to know that taking care of me isn't keeping you from becoming who you're meant to be. I need to know that you're doing this because you want to, not because you feel obligated. And I need to know that you trust me to make that decision for myself, Lily said. I need you to believe that I'm adult enough to know what I want and strong enough to handle the challenges. I do, I said, and realized I meant it. I do trust you. The house Lily found was perfect. We went to see it together on Friday, my first trip outside Maple Grove since I'd arrived 3 weeks earlier. It was a sunny October day, the kind where the autumn air is crisp and clean and full of possibility. The house was a beautiful craftsman-style ranch, built in the 1980s but recently updated. The mother-in-law suite had its own entrance, a small kitchenette, and a bathroom with all the accessibility features I needed. But it was also connected to the main house through a door in the living room, so I wouldn't feel isolated. The yard is what sold me, Lily said, wheeling me around to the back of the house. Look at this. The backyard was magnificent, nearly an acre of gently sloping lawn that ended in a small grove of aspen trees. Beyond that, the mountains rose up against the sky like a promise. There was a garden area that had been maintained by the previous owners, and a patio that would be perfect for sitting outside on nice days. We could put bird feeders right outside your bedroom window, Lily said. And there's enough space for a vegetable garden if you're interested. I remember how much you loved gardening before. Before I got sick. Before I gave up on so many things that used to bring me joy. Looking at this space, I could almost imagine myself puttering around in the dirt again, watching things grow. It's beautiful, I said. But sweetheart, this must cost. Let me worry about the finances, Lily said firmly. I've been saving money for years and my business is doing well. Plus, we'll be splitting utilities and groceries, and I'll be saving money by not paying rent in Portland. It actually makes financial sense. That evening, back at Maple Grove, I called Nancy to my room. She'd become something like a friend over the past few weeks, and I wanted her to know what was happening. I'm going home, I told her, unable to keep the excitement out of my voice. That's wonderful news, Mrs. Thompson. I'm so happy for you. Your daughter seems like a remarkable young woman. She is. But Nancy, I need to ask you something. Do you think I'm making the right choice? Am I being fair to her? Nancy sat down in the chair beside my bed. The same chair where Lily had been spending most of her time. Can I tell you something about this job? She said. I see a lot of families dealing with situations like yours. And the ones who do best aren't necessarily the ones with the most money or the best medical care. They're the families who figure out how to be honest with each other about what they need and what they can give. But what if I get worse? What if I become more than she can handle? Then you'll figure that out when it happens. Mrs. Thompson, your daughter isn't a child making an impulsive decision. She's a grown woman who's spent 3 years missing you and 3 days researching every aspect of your care. Trust her judgment. Trust your relationship. I'm scared, I admitted. Of course you are. You'd be crazy not to be scared. But you're also choosing hope over fear, and family over isolation. Those are brave choices. The discharge process took another week. There were meetings with social workers, consultations with my doctors, arrangements for home healthcare services, and countless forms to fill out. Through it all, Lily was a constant presence, organized, patient, and determined. On my last night at Maple Grove, I sat by the window one final time, looking out at the entrance. But instead of watching for someone to arrive, I was thinking about leaving. About the journey ahead of us. Mrs. Fletcher had been moved back into our room, and she was sitting in her chair by her own window. "You're going home tomorrow," she said suddenly. It was the first full sentence I'd heard her speak in weeks. "Yes," I said. "I'm going home with my daughter." "I had a daughter once," she said quietly. "She used to visit every week, and then every month, and then time just got away from us, you know?" "It's never too late," I said. "Maybe she'd come if you called her." Mrs. Fletcher smiled sadly. "Oh honey, she died 5 years ago. Cancer. Sometimes I forget." My heart ached for her, for all the Mrs. Fletchers in the world who were left with memories and regrets instead of the people they loved. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be sorry. Be grateful. You get to go home with your girl. You get a second chance. Not everyone gets that." That night, I lay awake thinking about second chances, about the choices that had led me to this moment, about the future that was waiting for us. I thought about my husband, about how much I wished he could see what our daughter had become, how proud he would be of her strength and compassion. And I thought about the woman I wanted to be for whatever time I had left, not the bitter, frightened person I'd become in my isolation, but someone worthy of the love and sacrifice my daughter was offering me. Tomorrow, I would go home. Not to the house where I'd lived alone with my pride and my fear, but to a new place where we could build something together, where we could learn to be mother and daughter again, but also just two women who loved each other and were brave enough to try. Moving day arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that makes everything feel possible. Lily had spent the previous week shuttling between Spokane and the new house, coordinating deliveries and setting up my room so that it would feel familiar and comfortable from the moment I arrived. "Ready?" she asked, standing beside my wheelchair in the lobby of Maple Grove. She was wearing jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked younger than her 35 years, but there was a steadiness about her that spoke of new maturity. "Ready," I said, though my stomach was fluttering with nerves. The goodbye at Maple Grove was more emotional than I'd expected. Over the past month, the place had become familiar, if not quite home. Nancy hugged me goodbye and made me promise to call if I needed anything. Even Dr. Patterson seemed genuinely pleased about my discharge, though I could see the concern in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. "Remember," he told Lily during our final meeting, "don't hesitate to contact us if you have any concerns. The transition to home care can be challenging, and we're here to support you both." The drive to the house took about 20 minutes through neighborhoods I'd known all my life, but was seeing with new eyes. Everything looked different from the passenger seat of Lily's Honda, more vivid somehow, more full of possibility. The trees were in full autumn color, painting the streets in shades of gold and crimson that seemed almost impossibly beautiful after weeks of institutional beige and muted green. "I stopped by your old house yesterday to pick up a few more things," Lily said as we drove. "I got your photo albums, your sewing box, and that terrible Afghan you made in the 70s. "That terrible Afghan kept you warm through plenty of winters," I protested, but I was smiling. "Oh, I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying it's aggressively orange. Your father picked out the yarn." That explains everything. It felt so natural, this gentle teasing between us. Like no time had passed at all, or like the time that had passed had been necessary somehow, allowing us both to grow into people who could appreciate each other better. When we turned into the driveway of our new house, I felt my breath catch. Lily had told me she'd been making improvements, but I hadn't expected this. The front yard had been landscaped with autumn flowers, mums and asters that would bloom well into November. There were pots of herbs on the front porch and a new welcome mat that read, "Home Sweet Home." "Lily," I whispered, "it's beautiful. Wait until you see the inside." She'd transformed the space into something that felt immediately familiar and comfortable. My favorite chair from the old house was positioned by the living room window, with my reading lamp beside it, and my current crossword puzzle book on the side table. Family photos were displayed on the mantel, pictures of Lily as a child, photos of her father and me when we were young, even some recent pictures she must have taken during her visits to Maple Grove. But the most touching detail was in my bedroom. She'd set up my easel, the one I hadn't used since before my stroke, with a blank canvas and my old paint box beside it. "I thought maybe, when you're ready, you might want to try painting again," she said, watching my face carefully. I hadn't painted in almost 3 years. After the stroke affected my fine motor control, I'd convinced myself that part of my life was over. But looking at the easel, I felt a stirring of something I'd thought was dead, the urge to create, to make something beautiful. "We'll see," I said, but I was already imagining what it might feel like to hold a brush again. The first few days were an adjustment for both of us. We had to learn each other's rhythms again, figure out how to share space while still maintaining some independence. Lily worked in the main house's spare bedroom, which she'd converted into an office, while I settled into my suite with its view of the mountains. A home healthcare aide named Patricia came 3 times a week to help with my physical therapy and to check on my medications. She was a sturdy woman in her 50s with kind eyes and infinite patience for my struggles with balance and coordination. "Your daughter seems lovely," she said during her first visit, watching through the window as Lily worked in the garden, planting spring bulbs for next year. "She is," I agreed. "I just hope I'm not making a mistake, letting her sacrifice so much for me." "Honey," Patricia said, adjusting the weights on my ankles for my exercises, "that girl doesn't look like someone who's sacrificing. She looks like someone who's exactly where she wants to be." She was right. There was a lightness to Lily that I hadn't seen since she was a child. She sang while she cooked breakfast, hummed while she worked at her computer, and seemed to find genuine joy in small domestic tasks like grocery shopping and laundry. It was as if taking care of me had given her permission to take care of herself, too. But it wasn't all easy. There were challenging days, moments when my body refused to cooperate, or when the frustration of my limitations overwhelmed me. About 2 weeks after I moved in, I had what could only be called a meltdown. It started small. I dropped my coffee cup at breakfast, and the ceramic shattered across the kitchen floor. Instead of the mild annoyance this should have caused, I felt a wave of rage and despair so intense it took my breath away. "It's fine, Mom," Lily said, already moving to clean up the mess. "These things happen." But it wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. I couldn't make coffee without dropping it, couldn't walk without a walker, couldn't remember the names of my medications without writing them down. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a collection of problems that needed managing. "I can't do this," I said, and my voice came out harsh and bitter. "I can't live like this." Lily stopped cleaning and looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this isn't living. This is just existing. Waiting to die while you waste the best years of your life playing nursemaid to a broken-down old woman." "Mom." "No." I was crying now, ugly tears of frustration and fear. "You should be out there living your life, dating, traveling, building a career. Not stuck here wiping up my messes and pretending everything is wonderful when it's not." Lily set down the dish rag and knelt beside my wheelchair. Her face was calm, but I could see the pain in her eyes. "Are you done?" she asked quietly. "What? Are you done telling me what I should be doing with my life? Because I'd like to tell you what I think." I nodded, ashamed of my outburst but still churning with emotion. "I think you're scared," she said. "I think you're having a bad day, and you're taking it out on me because I'm the safest person to take it out on. And I think you're trying to push me away again, because that's what you do when you're hurting." She was right, and that made it worse somehow. "But here's what you don't seem to understand, Mom. This is my life. This is exactly the life I want to be living. Yes, there are hard days. Yes, it's frustrating sometimes. But you know what was worse? 3 years of wondering if you were okay. 3 years of being too proud to call. 3 years of missing my mom." She reached over and took my hand. "I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm choosing something. I'm choosing family over isolation, love over pride, and hope over fear. If that's not what you want, If you'd rather be alone with your anger and your self-pity, then we can make other arrangements. But don't you dare try to make that choice for me." Her words hit me like cold water. I looked at her face, really looked at it, and saw not the dutiful daughter I'd been imagining, but a strong woman making a conscious choice about how she wanted to live. "I'm scared," I whispered. "I know you are. I'm scared too. But we don't have to be scared alone." That afternoon, after we'd both calmed down, Lily suggested we take a drive. It was a beautiful day, and she wanted to show me some of the changes that had happened in town during my months in the nursing home. As we drove through the familiar streets, she pointed out new businesses, renovated buildings, and changes to parks and neighborhoods I'd known for decades. But what struck me most was how she saw it all, not with the resignation of someone stuck in a small town, but with the affection of someone who had chosen to come home. "You really do want to be here," I said as we sat in the car outside the coffee shop where she'd worked during high school. "I really do," she confirmed. "Mom, I spent 15 years trying to prove I could make it on my own somewhere else. And I did make it. But making it and being happy aren't the same thing." "What makes you happy?" She was quiet for a moment, watching a young mother push her toddler on the swings in the small park across the street. "This morning, when you were doing your physical therapy exercises, you got so frustrated with that balance beam thing that you started muttering under your breath. Do you know what you were muttering?" I shook my head. "You were calling it a stubborn piece of wood, and telling it that it couldn't beat an old broad like you. And I was listening from the kitchen and I was thinking, that's my mom. That's the fighter who raised me." She turned to look at me. "That makes me happy. Getting to see you be yourself. Even when yourself is cranky and stubborn and frustrated. Getting to be part of your life again, instead of just getting updates through Christmas cards. Even when I have days like today? Especially when you have days like today. Because that means you trust me enough to let me see you at your worst. That means we're really family again." Over the following weeks, we settled into a rhythm that worked for both of us. Lily would work in her office in the mornings while I did my exercises with Patricia or worked on the crossword puzzles that helped keep my mind sharp. Afternoons were for shared activities, short walks around the neighborhood when the weather was nice, or sitting together in the living room while she worked on her laptop, and I tried my hand at simple sketches. I hadn't attempted painting yet, but I was building up to it, rediscovering the joy of observing light and shadow, of noticing the way colors change throughout the day. One afternoon in November, as we sat together by the fire, Lily looked up from her computer. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about Dad? About what he would think of all this?" The question caught me off guard, but not unpleasantly. We rarely talked about Richard directly, though his presence was felt in the house through the photos and memories we shared. "Every day," I said honestly. "I think he would be proud of you, of the woman you've become, of the choice you made to come home." "What about you? Do you think he'd be proud of you?" That was harder to answer. For years after Richard's death, I'd felt like I was failing at everything, failing as a mother, failing as a person trying to rebuild her life, failing at the simple task of moving forward. "I think he'd be proud that I finally swallowed my pride and called you," I said. "He always said I was too stubborn for my own good. He said the same thing about me." Well, he was right about both of us. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed that Lily had left her laptop open on the kitchen counter. The screen showed what looked like a website for a local community center, and I could see information about art classes and senior programs. The next morning, I asked her about it. "I was just looking at some options," she said a little sheepishly. "I thought maybe, when you're ready, you might be interested in getting out of the house more. Meeting some people." "What kind of people?" "There's a painting class on Tuesday mornings, and a book club on Thursday afternoons. Nothing too strenuous, just opportunities to be around other people who might share some of your interests." I considered this. The idea of painting with other people was both exciting and terrifying. I hadn't shown my work to anyone in years, and I wasn't sure I was ready for the judgment that might come with it. What if I'm not good enough anymore? I asked. What if you are? What if the other people are too young, or too healthy, or just different? What if they're not? What if they're just people who love art and want to share that with others? She had a point. And more importantly, I realized that my fear wasn't really about painting or other people. It was about putting myself out there, about risking failure or rejection, about being vulnerable again. Would you come with me the first time? I asked. If you want me to. But Mom, you might find that you don't need me there. You might find that you're stronger than you think you are. The painting class met in a bright room at the community center, filled with easels and the smell of turpentine and possibility. There were 8 other students, ranging in age from their early 60s to their mid-80s. Most were women, though there were 2 men who clearly took their art very seriously. The instructor was a woman named Carol, probably in her 50s, with paint-stained fingers and an encouraging smile. She welcomed me warmly and helped me set up my easel without making a fuss about my walker or my occasional difficulty with fine motor control. We're working on landscapes today, she announced to the class. But feel free to interpret that however you want. The goal is to enjoy the process, not to create a masterpiece. I stared at my blank canvas for a long time, trying to decide what I wanted to paint. Finally, I began sketching the view from my bedroom window: the mountains in the distance, the aspen grove, the garden where Lily had planted bulbs for spring. As I worked, I became aware of the other students around me. Margaret, a widow in her 70s, was painting a vibrant sunset. Frank, a retired teacher, was working on a detailed forest scene. Nobody was judging anyone else's work. They were all simply absorbed in the joy of creating. That's lovely, said the woman at the easel next to mine. Her name was Betty, and she'd been coming to the class for 2 years. Is that your view at home? Yes, I said. My daughter and I just moved into a house with this wonderful view of the mountains. How nice that you live with your daughter. My son keeps trying to get me to move in with him, but I'm not ready to give up my independence yet. I thought about her words as I added touches of blue to the distant peaks. Independence. For so long, I'd thought of it as an all-or-nothing proposition. Either I was completely self-sufficient or I was a burden. But maybe there was a middle ground, a way to be interdependent rather than independent or dependent. When the class ended, I was surprised to realize that 2 hours had passed without my noticing. My painting wasn't perfect, my hand wasn't as steady as it used to be, and some of the proportions were off, but it was recognizably the view from my window, and more importantly, it was mine. You did beautifully for your first day back, Carol said, stopping by my easel. Will we see you next week? Yes, I said, and I meant it. Yes, you will. That night, I showed Lily my painting. She studied it carefully, and I could see genuine appreciation in her eyes. It's beautiful, Mom. It really captures the feeling of the view, not just what it looks like. It's not very good technically, I said. It's not supposed to be technically perfect. It's supposed to be yours. She was right. The painting wasn't about achieving some external standard of excellence. It was about the joy of creating, about the satisfaction of translating what I saw and felt into something tangible. As November turned to December, our life together took on a comfortable predictability. I went to painting class on Tuesdays and had started attending the book club on Thursdays. Lily had connected with some other local freelancers and was building a network of professional relationships that excited her. We cooked dinner together most nights, watched old movies on weekends, and slowly, carefully, rebuilt the mother-daughter relationship we'd lost. But perhaps the most important change was harder to define. I was beginning to feel like myself again, not the self I'd been before my health problems, but a new version of myself that incorporated all my experiences, including the difficult ones. I was Elizabeth Thompson, mother and artist and survivor. I was a woman who had made mistakes and learned from them, who had lost things and found new things, who was living fully within the limitations life had given her. One snowy December evening, as we sat by the fire after dinner, Lily looked up from her book. Mom, do you ever regret it? Coming here instead of staying at Maple Grove? It was a question I'd been expecting, but it still required thought. Life here wasn't always easy. There were still days when my body frustrated me, still moments when I worried about being too much for Lily to handle. But regret? No, I said. No, I don't regret it at all. Do you? Not for a second, she said. But I do have a confession. What's that? I've been doing some online dating. I looked at her in surprise. Really? Here? In Spokane? She blushed slightly. There's this guy, his name is Michael. He's a teacher at the high school, divorced, no kids. We've been talking for a few weeks, and I was wondering, how would you feel if I invited him over for dinner sometime? The old me might have felt threatened by this. Might have worried that a man in Lily's life would mean less attention for me. But sitting there in our comfortable home, surrounded by the life we'd built together, I felt nothing but happiness for her. I'd love to meet him, I said. But fair warning, I'm going to interrogate him thoroughly. She laughed. I wouldn't expect anything less. What's he like? He's kind. And funny. And he didn't run away when I told him about my living situation. In fact, he said he thought it was wonderful that we found our way back to each other. Smart man. I think so. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about the unexpected turns life could take. 6 months ago, I'd been alone and bitter, convinced that my best days were behind me. Now I was living with my daughter, painting again, making new friends, and apparently about to meet a potential son-in-law. Life wasn't perfect. My health problems hadn't magically disappeared, and there would certainly be challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, I was looking forward to tomorrow, curious about what it might bring instead of dreading what it might take away. In my bedroom, I stopped in front of the easel where my latest painting was drying. It was another landscape, but this one showed the front of our house with its welcoming porch and autumn flowers. In the foreground, barely visible unless you knew to look for them, were 2 figures, a woman pushing another woman in a wheelchair, both of them heading toward the front door, both of them coming home. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came a sense of renewal that seemed to permeate every aspect of our lives. The bulbs Lily had planted in the fall were pushing up through the soil, creating small explosions of color throughout the garden. My painting had improved dramatically over the winter months, and Carol had even suggested I consider entering one of my pieces in the community center's annual art show. But the biggest change was Michael. Lily's new relationship had developed slowly and thoughtfully over the past few months. True to her word, she'd invited him for dinner in January, and I'd subjected him to what she later described as the most thorough background check outside the FBI. But Michael had passed every test with flying colors. He was 42, taught high school English, and had been divorced for 3 years after his ex-wife decided she preferred life in Seattle to small-town Montana. He had no children but loved kids, coached the school's debate team, and spent his summers working at a camp for underprivileged youth. Most importantly, he treated Lily with a respect and affection that warmed my heart, and he seemed genuinely interested in being part of our little family rather than competing with it. I have to admit, he'd said during that first dinner, cutting into the pot roast Lily had spent all day preparing, I was a little nervous about meeting you, Mrs. Thompson. Lily talks about you constantly, and I could tell how important your relationship is to her. And now? I'd asked, testing him. Now I understand why. You raised an incredible daughter, and you're pretty incredible yourself. It was exactly the right thing to say, but more than that, I could tell he meant it. When I'd shown him some of my paintings after dinner, he'd studied them with genuine interest and asked thoughtful questions about my technique and inspiration. When I'd had to excuse myself early because of fatigue, he'd stood immediately and offered to help me to my room without making a big show of it. He's a keeper, I told Lily later that night. You think so? I know so. But more importantly, what do you think? I think I'm falling in love with him, she'd admitted. And that scares me. Why does it scare you? Because I don't want anything to change what we have. You and me, this life we've built. I don't want him to think he has to compete with that. And I don't want you to feel like you're being replaced. I'd understood her fear because I'd felt echoes of it myself. But watching them together over the following weeks, I'd realized that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it multiplies. By March, Michael was spending most of his free time at our house. He'd bring his grading with him and work at the kitchen table, while Lily worked in her office, and I worked on my latest painting. Sometimes we'd all cook dinner together, with Michael proving surprisingly adept at making his grandmother's cornbread recipe, and me teaching him the secret to perfectly seasoned roast chicken. It felt natural, comfortable, like a family that had grown organically rather than one that had been forced together. And perhaps most importantly, I could see how happy Lily was. She glowed in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. And the constant undercurrent of worry that had characterized her first few months back home had disappeared entirely. One evening in April, as the three of us sat on the back patio watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold, Michael cleared his throat in a way that immediately got both our attention. "I have something I'd like to discuss with both of you," he said. And I could hear the nervousness in his voice despite his attempt to sound casual. Lily set down her wine glass and looked at him with curiosity and just a touch of apprehension. "I've been thinking about this for weeks," he continued. "And I want to do this right. Mrs. Thompson, I'd like your permission to ask Lily to marry me." The request was so old-fashioned, so sweetly formal, that I felt tears spring to my eyes. When was the last time a man had asked a woman's family for permission to propose? When was the last time I'd been considered an important enough part of my daughter's life to warrant such consultation? "Michael," I said softly, "you don't need my permission. Lily is a grown woman who can make her own decisions about her life." "I know that," he said quickly. "But you're important to her, which makes you important to me. If you're not comfortable with this, if you think I'm not right for her, I need to know that before I move forward." I looked at Lily, who was staring at Michael with an expression of wonder and joy that answered every question I might have had. "Do you love her?" I asked. "With all my heart." "Will you be good to her?" "I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of her." "And what about me? What about this situation? Because we're a package deal, you know. She's not going to abandon me to go off and be married." "I would never ask her to," he said firmly. "Mrs. Thompson, if Lily says yes, I'm not just asking her to marry me. I'm asking to become part of this family, this life you've built together. I want to be here for both of you, for whatever comes." I felt a warmth spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the evening wine. This man understood. He got it. He wasn't asking Lily to choose between her mother and her future. He was offering to be part of both. "Then yes," I said. "Yes, you have my blessing. My enthusiastic blessing." Lily burst into tears and launched herself from her chair into Michael's arms. As I watched them hold each other, laughing and crying at the same time, I felt a completeness I hadn't experienced in years. My daughter was loved, truly loved, by a man who understood that love meant joining a life, not dismantling it. The proposal itself happened 2 weeks later, during what Michael had told Lily was just a casual walk through the park where they'd had their first official date. But I knew better. He'd spent an entire evening showing me the ring, a simple but beautiful solitaire that had belonged to his grandmother, and asking for my advice about timing and location. They set the wedding date for October, almost exactly 1 year after I'd moved in with Lily. As we began planning the celebration, I was struck by how different this felt from the weddings I'd imagined for my daughter over the years. Instead of the elaborate affair I'd once pictured, they wanted something simple and intimate, a small ceremony in our backyard, surrounded by the people who mattered most to them. "Are you sure?" I asked Lily one afternoon as we looked through bridal magazines. "You only get married once, hopefully. You could have something bigger, more formal." "Mom," she said, looking up from a picture of an elaborate ball gown, "I spent 15 years running away from home. Why would I want to get married anywhere else?" The planning process was its own kind of joy. Lily asked me to help her choose flowers, and we decided on a combination of white roses and the yellow lilies that had been in the bouquet she'd brought to the nursing home. Michael's parents, who lived in Colorado, came for a visit in July and proved to be delightful people who welcomed both Lily and me into their family with open arms. "You've done a beautiful job with your daughter," Michael's mother, Susan, told me as we sat in the garden one evening. "She's everything we could have hoped for in a daughter-in-law." "She's pretty wonderful," I agreed. "But she did most of the raising herself, especially after her father died." "Well, she clearly had a good foundation to build on." As summer progressed, I found myself thinking more and more about the passage of time, about the cycles of life that had brought us all to this point. A year ago, I'd been alone in a nursing home, convinced that my life was essentially over. Now I was planning my daughter's wedding and looking forward to the possibility of grandchildren someday. In August, Something unexpected happened that put everything into even sharper perspective. I was at my Tuesday painting class, working on a still life of sunflowers, when I felt a familiar weakness in my left side. The brush fell from my fingers, and I had trouble forming words when Carol asked if I was all right. The other students rallied around me with the kind of quick efficiency that spoke of experience with medical emergencies among their peers. Someone called 911 while someone else called Lily, and within minutes I was surrounded by paramedics, and then being loaded into an ambulance. Mini stroke, Dr. Patterson explained to Lily and Michael in the hospital emergency room. Not uncommon given her medical history, but we caught it early. There shouldn't be any permanent damage. But it could happen again, Lily said. It wasn't a question. Yes, it could. We'll need to adjust her medications and monitor her more closely. But Mrs. Thompson, you did everything right. You didn't panic, you accepted help immediately, and you got medical attention quickly. As I lay in the hospital bed that night, attached to monitors and IVs, I felt an odd sense of peace. Not because I welcomed health crises, quite the opposite. But because I realized that I wasn't afraid in the way I once would have been. I wasn't alone, and I wasn't without purpose. Lily had curled up in the uncomfortable hospital chair, and was planning to spend the night, despite my protests that it was unnecessary. "Mom," she said when I suggested for the third time that she go home, "where exactly do you think I'd rather be right now? In your own bed with your fiancé?" "With my mom, making sure she's okay. Michael understands. He's the one who insisted I stay." The mini-stroke turned out to be a minor blip in our preparations. I spent 2 days in the hospital and came home with some new medications and a renewed appreciation for the fragility of life. But it also gave me a new urgency about the wedding, about making sure I was fully present for every moment of the celebration. October arrived with the kind of perfect fall weather that makes you believe in divine timing. The leaves on the aspen trees in our backyard had turned golden, creating a natural cathedral for the ceremony. Lily had strung small white lights through the branches, and we'd arranged chairs in a simple semicircle facing the grove. The morning of the wedding, I woke before dawn and sat by my bedroom window, watching the sun come up over the mountains. In a few hours, my daughter would be married in our backyard, surrounded by the life we'd built together. It felt like a miracle, but also like the most natural thing in the world. Lily's wedding dress was simple but elegante, a knee-length white dress with 3/4 sleeves that she'd found at a boutique in town. She'd asked me to help her get ready, and as I fastened the string of pearls that had been her grandmother's around her neck, I felt the weight of tradition and continuity. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," I told her, smoothing an imaginary wrinkle from her dress. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "Good nervous or bad nervous?" "Good nervous. Like jumping off a cliff but knowing you can fly nervous. That's the best kind." The ceremony itself was perfect in its simplicity. Michael's parents and sister had come from Colorado, along with a few of his closest friends from school. Lily's guest list included her college roommate, a few friends from Portland, and several of the people we'd both gotten to know since moving to the house, including Carol from the painting class and Patricia, my home health aide. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when the minister asked who was giving Lily away. Instead of the traditional, her mother and I, or I do, I said what was in my heart. She gives herself away, as she always has. But she does so with my blessing and with the knowledge that she's not losing a family, she's gaining one. As I watched them exchange vows under the golden aspens, with the mountains as their backdrop and the people they loved as their witnesses, I felt a completeness I'd never experienced before. This was what life was supposed to be, not a series of losses to be endured, but a continuous cycle of love and growth and renewal. The reception was held right there in the backyard, with tables set up on the patio and a simple buffet prepared by a local caterer. Michael's father made a toast about the power of love to bring families together across time and distance. Lily's college roommate told embarrassing stories about their sorority days. And I, surprising myself with my boldness, stood up to speak about second chances, and the courage it takes to let people love you. A year ago, I told the assembled guests, I thought my life was over. I was alone, bitter, and convinced that my best days were behind me. But then this remarkable young woman. I gestured toward Lily, who was crying openly, reminded me that love isn't diminished by sharing it. It multiplies. I looked at Michael, who was holding Lily's hand and looking at her with such obvious adoration that it made my heart ache with happiness. Michael, welcome to our family. Thank you for understanding that when you married my daughter, you weren't taking her away from me. You were giving us both a bigger family to love. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, the three of us sat on the patio surrounded by the detritus of celebration, empty glasses and crumpled napkins and flower petals scattered across the ground. We should clean this up, Lily said, but she made no move to get out of her chair. Tomorrow, Michael said. Tonight, we just sit here and be happy. Are you happy, Mom? Lily asked, reaching over to take my hand. I looked around at our backyard, transformed by love and celebration into something magical. I thought about the journey that had brought us to this moment, the mistakes and reconciliations, the fears overcome and the trust rebuilt. I thought about the future stretching ahead of us, full of possibilities I couldn't have imagined a year ago. Yes, sweetheart, I said. I'm happy. I'm so very happy. And I was. Not because life had suddenly become perfect or easy, but because I'd learned that happiness isn't the absence of struggle, it's the presence of love that's strong enough to endure whatever comes. As we finally made our way inside, Lily helping me navigate the slight step up to the back door while Michael gathered the wedding gifts, I caught sight of my reflection in the patio door. I looked older than I had a year ago, certainly. The mini-stroke had left me slightly more fragile, and the walker was now a permanent part of my daily life. But there was something else in my reflection. Something I hadn't seen in years. Contentment. Not the contentment of resignation, but the contentment of a life fully lived, of relationships restored, of love given and received without reservation. In my bedroom that night, I sat at my easel one final time before bed. The canvas held my latest painting, a view of our backyard during the wedding, with the golden aspens and the small gathering of people, and the sense of celebration that had filled the air. It wasn't technically perfect, but it captured something true about the day, about the love that had brought us all together. Tomorrow Lily and Michael would return from their brief honeymoon, a long weekend at a bed and breakfast in Montana's Glacier National Park. They'd move into the main house together while I remained in my suite, but with connecting doors that would allow us to be as close or as separate as we needed on any given day. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. My health would continue to decline gradually, and there would be difficult decisions to make about care and independence and quality of life. Michael and Lily would want to start their own family eventually, which would bring new dynamics and new joys and new complications. But tonight, none of that mattered. Tonight, I was Elizabeth Thompson, mother of the bride, artist, survivor, and the luckiest woman alive. I was part of a family that had chosen each other despite, and because of all our imperfections. I was home. I set down my brush and looked out the window at the mountains, dark silhouettes against the star-filled sky. Somewhere up there, I like to think, Richard was smiling down at the life we'd created together, and the daughter we'd raised and the love that continued to grow and multiply long after we thought the story was over. Thank you, I whispered to him, to the universe, to whatever force had brought us all together. Thank you for second chances. Then I turned off the light and made my way to bed, tired but completely, utterly content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but tonight, everything was exactly as it should be. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that was more than enough.